Good evening. This is Pastor Torri, and this is the time of Stories with Pastor Torri tonight. And for the last few weeks, we have been talking about racism and discrimination, and it is still going on today, and I don't see it ending any soon. And equality and being treated fairly is really important. And I think many people all across our nation are realizing that. And it is a heartbreaking time. It is a frustrating time, but it's also a time where we need to go inside of ourselves and be reflective on just realizing that there is racism in each one of us. And over the last probably few weeks, I have been realizing and recognizing the racism that is in me. And I brought in a friend tonight. Her name is Pastor Judy from our church here in Hackensack at St. Paul's Lutheran. And her and I actually got to do some training with some pastors and organization leaders from Minneapolis. They had a call out for clergy to come into Minneapolis a few weeks ago and help keep people safe, help pass out water, help in the protests. And we are going to interview her tonight and ask her what exactly went on. And we're going to have her tell her story tonight. And I'm going to bring her in now. Oh. Judy, are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Story Time with Pastor Torri.
Thank you.
Now, you and I did a training together when they called out and asked clergy to come down to the Twin Cities. And you and I sat in a training session together. And that was a very interesting time because both you and I needed to make individual decisions about whether to go or not. And my decision was that I was best to stay put and to stay here in Hackensack. And your decision was to go to Minneapolis and help for a few days. What made you decide to go to Minneapolis and participate?
I would say that I watched the horrific video of George Floyd's murder. I had seen it before we had the training, and I watched it again. And something kind of just inside of me was, this is never going to change unless people like me enter into this undertaking of dismantling racism in our country. And showing up is one way to do that. There's many other ways as well. And I'm a chaplain for the sheriff's department up here, so I already knew what that entailed. And I have always, my whole life, had inside of me this drive for the oppressed, this drive for the underdog, this drive for people who aren't being treated as human beings should be treated. And I've watched these deaths occur again and again and again. And this one just seemed so categorically different. It was like slow motion. And all of a sudden, the 400 years of what's happened to Black people in this country just came flooding in. And I just prayed and had to go. I felt like I really didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Which I know that makes not a lot of sense, but it is true.
Yeah. You were convicted to go.
Oh, are you a pastor? Pastor? Well said. Yes.
No, I might be. I don't know.
Yeah, in my evangelical upbringing language, it would be the Lord convicted me.
Yeah.
And told me I needed to go. Lutherans aren't quite so, don't use that language as much, but yeah. Well spoken, friend.
So when you got there, Can you maybe take us through the story of your experience and what happened and
I went on Sunday after church and got down there and was in contact with Pastor Kelly. I'm blanking on her last name, from the church in St. Anthony, and was assigned duties for the next day to volunteer. And I also had a carload of supplies, because one of the things in the training session they said was they were desperate for diapers, formula, baby food, pull-ups, and baby wipes. So I had my car stuffed to the gills with those. And so dropped those off early on Monday morning at Bethlehem Lutheran Church, and was so heartened to see the number of people who had come out to help. And so disheartened to see the number of people whose stores and pharmacies and gas stations are destroyed, who were in the line. The line to get assistance was quite long. And then from there, I met with Pastor Kelly at Reformation Lutheran Church. There was going to be a march to the governor's mansion. And so I helped at St. Paul's set up things, and the spirit was so lovely. It was just of positivity and hope. And we got the medical station set up, we got the water station set up, and then we were given these orange shirts that said chaplain and some supplies to walk around in. And then we walked up to the governor's thing. And again, the hope was just overwhelming. I mean, it's tragic that something like Mr. Floyd's horrific death would trigger something like this, but there were thousands of people in front of the governor's mansion, all colors, all creeds, all ages. There were little kids with their mom and dad holding their hands, black and white. There were Native Americans. The Aztec dancers were dancing before it actually started, and they were honoring George Floyd and others. And it was just it just felt like a groundswell of goodness and hope. And the speakers, it was very peaceful. I want to really say that, because I know there's been a lot of conversation about that. We can maybe talk about that later, but it was very peaceful. Everyone was extraordinarily polite to one another. It was just so, you would maybe bump into someone and everyone was just like, oh, no problem. It was just really lovely. And the speakers were good. I learned so much that I didn't know. And I mostly listened. Some people were overcome, and that's when the chaplains would visit with them. Some people were very emotional, rightly so. And it just was a really profound experience at the Capitol. And then we handed out water because it was so hot that day. And then I came home and got home about 8:00 that night. Not home here, home to my friends. And then the next day in the morning, I went to Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, which was kind of ground zero for the destruction. And for blocks in all directions, boarded up windows, burned out buildings, all sorts of stuff. But at Holy Trinity, which is a Lutheran congregation there, again, there were carload after carload of people pulling up with supplies, and then volunteers. I was a volunteer helping to give out directions and supplies and just encouragement. And it was 94 degrees and it was so hot. And I was just speaking with a friend saying, and it was something that I'll never forget, is these families walking up, and because the buses were shut down because of the unrest and the well, I don't know that the light rail goes right by. Yeah, it does. The light rail was shut down. So all these families had to walk blocks and blocks in the heat to get these essential supplies, because there was no stores. These essential supplies of food, water, diapers, baby food, everything. And these moms and families were coming, and they had to walk their kids all that way.
Mm.
And then they had to walk them all the way home in that heat, carrying, because they didn't have cars, didn't have transportation to do that. And that was a really profound thing. And I thought how often I've complained having to take the garbage bin to the end of my quarter long mile road. And was pretty ashamed because they weren't complaining. It was pretty amazing to see.
Yeah.
And again, people of all colors, all faiths helping together. There wasn't, it was very powerful. And then I went to the clergy march in the afternoon. I'll be done here. I don't want to talk too long. The clergy march in the afternoon was also very powerful. They had all the Black clergy in the city gathered and vested. And then all white clergy were invited to march behind them in the symbolic showing of having their back. And we marched for 6 to 8 blocks, I can't remember exactly, to the George Floyd Memorial. And that was and in silence. And it was really powerful. And they had a short service there. And I think probably the most moving, unsettling and moving, and is there were Black people on the side watching and cheering for this crowd of clergy. And I can't tell you how many of them said, "Look, oh, thank God the white church has finally showed up."
Yeah.
And I just thought, that's what it's going to take, is for people like you and me and people of good faith and goodwill. We have to enter into this because it's our Black brothers and sisters have been crying out for generations, and it hasn't changed, and it must change. So,
I agree with you.
So that was then I went to Christ the King there and helped a little at the end of that march. So
what was the highlight for you during that time?
I think 2 things. The clergy march was just extraordinarily powerful. It's hard to put that in words. It was just powerful. It felt like the Spirit was really, really present. And when we got to the memorial for George, where his body had lain and the outline of his body, an artist had turned that into an angel and had wings. And there were 2 huge circles of flowers and all kinds of artwork. And I mean, it's a memorial. It's quite moving, very, very powerful. And just watching the people pull together was very, very powerful. And then I left out the Capitol protest of young people. Thousands of young people on Tuesday afternoon were at the Capitol. After the clergy march, that's why I was at Christ the King. And they were all peaceful. It was as many white people as people of color. And that to me was just such a lovely thing. It's taken too long. And I'm as guilty as heck.
You can say hell. It's okay.
I'm as guilty. I mean, I don't enter the fray myself. I worry about it. I think about it. I pray about it. But but it's time. So that was really powerful, seeing all those thousands of young people.
Yeah.
Too.
And what was the hardest part of being there?
I think the hardest part of being there was seeing the National Guard was out in force. It looked like it looked like a war zone.
Yeah.
And I think I work with the Cass County Sheriff's Department. I cannot say enough about law enforcement. So it was hard for me to hear negative things about law enforcement, very hard, because I know the job that the guys and gals up here have to do, and how difficult it is and how good they are at it up here. And I always have supported law enforcement. So that was difficult for me. But the more I listened, the more I learned. And that was, so for me, in the end, I realized this isn't about, hating the police. It's about recognizing there is a system in place that the police are also stuck in.
Yeah.
And we have to change that. So for me, it wasn't about, the police are bad and all that. That some people are putting it that way, and I don't. So.
And what is, if you could say one thing or maybe two things that you took away from that you really want to bring back here to Hackensack or to this community, or even to people who are out there watching, knowing that we're live right now, what would that be?
I think the first thing is something that a person who knows said, and that is, I'm sure you've heard it as well. It's like people, when you say Black Lives Matter, they say all lives matter. And that's true. That's absolutely true.
Yep.
I mean, but someone helped me see something so clearly. It's like, if my dad died and I came and told you, Torri, my dad just died, and your response to me was, all dads die.
Yeah.
Or, my grandparents were in a horrible car wreck and they died. All grandparents die. It doesn't matter. The particular is what matters, is I guess what I'm trying to say. And absolutely all lives matter, but all lives are not experiencing what our Black brothers and sisters are experiencing. And that's why the Black Lives Matter is not saying other lives don't matter. It's saying we matter too.
Yeah.
And historically in our country, that has not been true, sadly. And for people like you and me, and again, the good people of Hackensack who in my congregation, they're not actively racist. I don't believe. I don't know anyone in my congregation who is. But there is so much we need to learn. The second thing is, one, Black Lives Matter, to say all lives matter in response to that is really insensitive and almost cruel, given what's happening. And then the second is, just like you said, I'm a recovering racist. I love to say it that way because I just thought I'm a good person. I have white skin, but I'm a good person and I'm not prejudiced, and I'm not. But what I didn't realize, and what I've come to realize, is there is a real thing called white privilege. And if you hear me say that and are upset, I just invite you to just listen to stories of other people, because white privilege is real. I never had to raise my children. I didn't have sons, but I never had to raise them telling them what to do when they got arrested so they wouldn't get shot. And Black mothers have to do that. Black mothers and fathers have to do that every day. I mean, there's so many examples. Redlining in the banks, not letting those people into certain areas. I mean,
not allowing mortgages and
absolutely redlining. And also the systemic systems of poverty, of racism that have been in place since the very beginning. Black people could not own land in our country. So from the very beginning, they were handicapped as far as, they couldn't vote. 1955, civil rights, they got the right to vote, and they still were threatened and still continue to be. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to ignore
hey,
that.
you're going to shut your phone off.
I thought I did. Dang. I did now. So, there's so many things. And I say this in hope, and I say there are so many resources out there that we can learn. We can learn, and we can enter into this. And then I have a third one. Can I have a third one? The second one is white privilege is real, and we need to learn. And the third one is This is not a partisan or liberal or political agenda. I'm a person of faith, and in my ordination vows, I was asked, do you strive to work for peace and justice in all that you say and do?
Mhm.
And I answered, I will by the help of God. And I assume you had something very similar in yours.
Mhm.
So this work for justice and this work for compassion and kindness and inclusion isn't some partisan agenda. It is actually our call as the people of God. And it makes me so very sad that it has become yet another political football, partisan football passed around.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know how to deal with that really, but
Mhm.
but
This is a human issue. It's a
yes,
human issue, and it has nothing to do with blue. It doesn't have anything to do with red. It has to do with humanity
mhm.
and justice. Um, and I guess that is what I am learning and continue to learn. The biggest thing that I have learned is that I need to be educated.
Yes.
I need to educate myself
Mhm.
on how to be a pastor who is an ally to the Black
Mhm.
community. And I'm starting to read. I'm starting to listen and hopefully understand and become a pastor who is an ally. And I know within the UCC denomination, a lot of my colleagues were out on those streets with you, and they were walking shoulder to shoulder with you. And I am proud of them, and I have prayed for them. I know that our conference minister has been out quite a bit and walking the streets and doing protesting and handing out water and and uh, that's probably the first and foremost thing is that what I need to do is I need to be educated and listen more than I speak at this point in time. Yeah.
I think you're right. And there are some great books out there. One that I think is really essential is called The New Jim Crow.
Ah.
And it is a fantastic book about our justice system and the mass incarceration and disproportionate incarceration and sentencing of Black people versus same people doing the same crimes who are white.
Mhm.
There's a book called The Lynching Tree by James Cone, and he likens every lynching to the crucifixion in a very powerful way.
Yeah. What was that book that was on your end table?
Oh, White Fragility.
That's it.
White Fragility, why white people are so I can't remember the word squeamish about talking about race. And again, I think our response is we're good people.
Hmm.
Hackensack are good people.
Good. Hmm.
There's no question.
Yeah.
And then they're not prejudiced, but being good people and not speaking up about what the structural and systemic issues that we are facing in our country right now is our Black brothers and sisters see that as complicity.
Hmm.
They do. I mean,
And
being complicit in keeping things as they are.
yeah. Well, and two, living up in Hackensack here, we don't have much of a Black community here,
Mhm.
but we do have a Native American community here,
Mhm.
and they have been wronged in so many ways
Yes.
that I don't even know how to speak about it intelligently. Um, but I know living up here, we might not have that issue with what is going on in Minneapolis, but we sure can find ways to be involved in the community that we're in, as far as trying to understand the Native American community. And one of the things that I am interested in doing is I'm involved, and we just met once, a small group of people from I think, three different churches in this community, where we got together over Zoom and we just started talking about what this all means to us, and trying to filter through and trying to figure out in a small group atmosphere of what do we do? What do we think? And we've come to terms of, immediate need. What can we do right now in this situation? What needs to happen? And then thinking outside of the box and going through the education. What can we learn? What do we need to know? How can we grow from this? And how can we teach others to grow with us? And then third is policy and law and change.
Yeah.
And I think someone brought up the term restorative justice.
Yeah.
And I don't know much about that. Like I said, I need to learn. You have something to say?
Well, no, I know a lot. I used to work for the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition. Yeah. And restorative justice is different than punitive justice. It's you make amends and then you work for reconciliation. Yeah. It's a great model.
So I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that group. And I'll invite you next time we meet. And I think you would be a nice voice to add in there. And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Our synod actually, and I think the UCC is in this too with us in Duluth. We have started walking together with our Native brothers and sisters, and it is exactly what you said. It's asking them what we need. What we need most is education and an awareness of history and an awareness of the Native experience with not only law enforcement, but with other cultures and how they're treated. And we need that as well with, I would argue, the Muslim community. We need it with the Black community, because difference so often threatens us. And really, God created diversity. And we thrive. How boring if we were all the same. How boring. So I think the onus is on white people, really, because we have posted for a long, long time. Like one thing I am doing and have been doing for the last 15 days, I think, I am either reading or watching a movie, a movie about Black individuals like Thurgood Marshall, the Just Mercy movie that just came out about there's so many historical, Harriet Tubman, Selma, all of them, the Butler, every night. And just to get a sense of, and of course it's a movie, so it won't be but to get a sense of what really has gone on and what Black people and our Native brothers and sisters have been dealing with for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Generations and generations and generations. So, yeah.
Well.
Oh, are we done?
I think this is going to be a conversation that will happen again and again and again and again. And not only between you and I, and not only in our community, but all across our nation. And I think for the first time, like you said, that powerful statement when somebody said the white churches showed up.
Oh, yep.
Yep. That gets you.
It does. And there were hundreds of white clergy. There were hundreds of white clergy with collars and yeah, it did. It still does get me. It's like, this is what we are to be about as church. The kingdom of God has to do not simply with eternal salvation for us. It has to do with salvation here and now for everyone.
Yeah.
And by salvation, I mean safe relationships of safety, nurture, caring, love, forgiveness, compassion, generosity of spirit, all that. That's the kingdom work.
Yeah. And being saved is just not a one-time deal. This is the process of being saved and
bringing
the here and now, and, the kingdom of heaven, the here and now of making this world and living as Christ would live, and being the hands and feet of Jesus Christ. So
Yeah. Oh,
go ahead.
no, the one thing, so if anybody's out there listening and you feel your blood pressure going up at the words white privilege or whatever, if something's really bothering you, I just invite you. I don't know where to look. I'm looking at you, Torri, so I don't know where I'm looking at you.
Look at the camera.
Look at the camera. I hear there.
There you go.
Oh, that could have told me that earlier. No,
fine.
no. Please talk to Pastor Torri or me, because it is not about partisan politics. I swear on the Holy Bible, it is about being the church in the world for the sake of Christ.
Yeah. And it's okay to have different views. I mean, I know many people who are on what you would call sides or aisles, as far as red and blue and Democrat and Republican and liberal and conservative. And as you said before, people are good. Their intentions are good. And I think people just view things differently and have different ideas. And if we can find something common to agree on, that's where we can start. Yeah. There is a prayer that I prayed last week, and I'm going to bring it up again. And I'm going to ask for those who are listening, and Pastor Judy, if you and I can pray together and agree. This was a prayer that was written by a member in the Iona community. And I believe it's very applicable, and I believe it's very beautiful. And it says, I think, what my heart really wants to say. So if we can pray this together, that would be great. God beyond borders, we bless you for strange places and different dreams, for the demands and the diversity of the wider world, for the distance that lets us look back and reevaluate, for a new ground where broken stems can take root and grow and blossom. We bless you for the friendship of strangers, the richness of our cultures, and the painful gift of freedom. Blessed are you, God, beyond borders. But if we have overlooked the exiles in our midst, heightened our exclusion for our indifference, given our permission for a climate of fear and tolerance and a culture of violence, have mercy on us. God, who takes side with justice, confront our prejudice, stretch our narrowness, sift our laws and our lives with the penetrating insight of your Spirit, until generosity is our only measure. Amen.
Amen.
So thank you, Pastor Judy.
You're welcome. This was cool.
This was very good. Who knew this would be fun, huh?
No, I mean, who knew you could do this? See, I'm older than you.
Oh, yeah, this is all new to me too. I've just learned this in the last probably.
Can I say hello, union people? I missed you guys. Hello.
Yes. And you know what? You can even take this and put this on your church Facebook page too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, okay. You can. I believe it's shareable.
Okay.
So, but thank you. Can you imagine doing this every Wednesday?
Oh, it'd be fun. We could talk about all sorts of things.
We could.
Everything. Like, I can just think of many things. So.
Okay. Pastor Judy, blessings to you.
And thank you. And we will see you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Peace, guys. Peace.